in the past, even when the internet was out, you had a map of a country, and that map was for that country, and how that was represented was for the people of that country. And so it was relatively simple to normalize to whatever the country itself expected its map to look like. But when you have a single map for the whole world that is shared among all viewers, you immediately get into this problem that different countries have different opinions about the maps. And when Google Maps and then Google Earth became extremely popular, we very quickly became the single map that people argued over. In the past, there had probably been skirmishes for MapQuest or some other thing that was showing data, but we I think unified everybody's strong opinions about maps, and they expected if it their view to be shown in Google, or they would not be happy. And our solution with Google Earth and showing disputed borders, labeling them as disputed borders, the dashed lines, I think was our attempt at this. And this addressed many of the situations, because I think most countries accepted that borders were in dispute, and there is another opinion here. But if you wanted to do business in China or India, then it really mattered how you drew the map, because their opinions, they were very much in denial of the other country's opinion. And so with Google Maps in particular, we did have this benefit of the fact that the domain maps.google.in for India was different than maps.google.com. And so you could serve a map customized to India or .cn to China that was, met the letter of the law there, but you would still end up if you went to google.com, you would get the disputed borders, and you would get the one map that we tried to, answer all these questions. So for maps, you could serve slightly different maps for different countries and to do business there. For Google Earth, it was harder because it's pretty much one binary, so it was one answer.
And so how did you handle that? Because now you basically have multiple Google Maps. You have multiple maps that you just showed at different people. And so everybody thinks there's one map, but there's kind of these multiple versions. But there is one place where you have to have a single one.
That's right. And we just, with Google Earth, we just fought it. And we said, hey, the borders are disputed. We're drawing the dashed lines. And,
right.
That's the way it goes. I think we eventually walked through every disputed border, some of which I think we were unaware of when we started, because, we would get protests from very specific countries about, borders in the Andes Mountains.
Yeah, because maps are also something that are dynamic, in the sense that it's not just you have your map and it's going to be this case and it's never going to move ever again. I mean, there's the thing about satellite images, and you want recent satellite image. There's things where a road is blocked and now traffic is moved, but borders, not as much anymore these days, but there have always been constant thing. There's never been something that's been fixed. And so I guess I didn't even think about it from the context of borders having to change, but that's also something where, I don't know, like Crimea or Ukraine, and then do you change the border? That sounds like a really hard problem.
One of the border challenges that we had was that we took our national, international borders from the best data sets that we could find. We didn't author them ourselves. We would look for the references, and so our national borders around the world, were quite good, but there was a mistake in one of them, and there was a area of land on a river between Nicaragua and Costa Rica where we had drawn the border in the wrong place. And so Nicaragua said, we are going to take possession of this land. And so they put 25, 30 troops on this land. They invaded Costa Rican territory, and for 3 weeks they went there, and it said, because the Google Maps has said this is our land. And it turns out that we had the wrong border data, and we had to correct it. And we did correct it, and they withdrew, not because of our correction, but they did in fact claim that they were using this map as their reference for why they own this piece of land. And Costa Rica was in a bit of a spot because they did not have a standing army, so there's not much they could do about it. So yes, borders matter, and maybe we were an excuse, but
Yeah, it's not just polygons in a database. It's I don't know, it's just such a telling story, because it's like, from a data point of view, it's like one of the simplest things. It's lines. They're pretty complicated, but there isn't even that many of them. Like, you can download the borders of the entire world at a pretty high resolution, and it's a file of maybe like 10 megabytes.
Yep.
It's not that big of a deal, but in terms of the data side, but the implications of that file are huge. And I don't know, I think sometimes, I know I get bogged into like these really big computational problems, but some of the ones that matter are not even huge engineering ones. I don't know, that I find that very interesting.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, maps in general were funded for sort of two reasons: exploration and border disputes, right? The explorers, all those globes that we saw, were trying to get an accurate depiction of the geography, but many of the maps were, who owns which property, whether it's a county, a city, or a country, and there had to be agreement on this, and it, especially when you get down to the finer grains, like when Google Maps adds city borders and property borders, we put in our best source for property border data, but immediately people would go, this is wrong, my neighbor is on my property and all this stuff. And it turns out that the plat maps that the county has have never been accurately digitized to the level where you can just drop them down on a map and not provoke at least some questions about accuracy.
Yeah, I think if you make it very easy to access as well, like if it's just somewhere on some hard drive and nobody knows about it, doesn't really matter. But as soon as the entire world can see it in 2 clicks, then it sort of matters.
Yeah, and that's to a degree what Google Maps and Earth did, is they brought all of this data that was hard to use, and they put it in front of consumers who immediately started exploring it, and then discovered what we all eventually discovered, which is map data is deeply inaccurate. It's a very hard thing to map the world accurately, and the tolerance for error when nobody could check, or very few people could check, was much higher than when you put hundreds of millions of eyeballs over millions of hours on this data. They will find every mistake because somebody somewhere is standing next to the thing in question and says it's not there, or you missed it. And in the grand scheme of things, that was, I think, the single biggest revelation we had at Google Maps was when we published Street View data. We sort of immediately got this backlash from people who said, look, your Street View picture says that the street name is this and the street number is that, and your map doesn't say that. What's up? And the reason was we were licensing data from TomTom at the time, and it was, debatably one of the 2 best data sources, available, but it wasn't very good. It had all of these errors, and that led us on our path of building our own maps.
If you found this conversation interesting, you can watch the full episode right here. And all these conversations are also available as audio-only podcast episodes. So if you want to listen to the full conversation, I'll have links in the description to the episode, to some of the most popular podcast apps like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever. Everything down below.